now that we have survived the night, let's see if we can make it through the dawn. And, by the way, I am not going to be talking about the day this month. You can forget that. Tonight's discussion is on both versions of Dawn of the Dead, and in this case, there isn't really that much that they borrow from the original and the remake, so there aren't going to be that many elements that I'm going to compare in this video. In both of these movies, the basic gist of the plot is that there is a zombie apocalypse going on, and a group of characters decide to go to this mall to hold up for a while. And really, the mall is just about the most ideal place to go to during a zombie apocalypse. You're going to have all kinds of supplies there, food stuff, clothes stuff. Obviously, you've got shelter. And you even got some shit to keep yourself entertained so that you can kind of get your mind off of just surviving and be able to live. One of the main differences between these two movies is that the remake takes place at the very beginning of the zombie apocalypse, whereas the original is kind of a sequel to Night of the Living Dead, except that it follows a completely different group of characters and the zombies are now blue for some reason. And in the original, civilization is still struggling to hold up. You still have cable television and law enforcement, but no matter what people do, the zombie apocalypse is merely in its dawning stage. One thing I'd like to start off comparing is the soundtrack to these two movies. In the original, you have this great old-school synthetic horror movie score, as well as this song that plays at the very end. It's the same song they play at the end of Robot Chicken, but, with chicken sound effects. I have no idea what it's called, but I always enjoy hearing it. It does get a little cheesy at the end, though, with this over-the-top kind of heroic theme. And then in the remake, at the very beginning, as the logos are popping up, the soundtrack just sets up this very tense sort of atmosphere. And it's also got quite a few awesome songs in it, like the original Hangman song by Tyler Bates, The Man Comes Around by Johnny Cash, and then at the very end of the movie, when it's playing Down by the Sickness by Disturbed, when I saw this for the first time, this was the thing which first got me into heavy metal. So in talking about the characters of Dawn of the Dead, in the original film, you're basically following an ensemble of 4 people throughout most of the running time. And they are very likable people. They have some great emotional moments, and you do care about them. But the main thing that stands out about them that kind of adds to their likability is how much fun they are. They have this great sense of humor when it comes to the zombie apocalypse. And if for nothing else, they would be ideal teammates just for how much they would be able to boost morale. And then the original also has considerably more villainous characters. Like at the beginning, you've got this asshole bigoted cop who, as the police are raiding this ghetto apartment building, he just goes in and starts blasting people left and right. And then you've got that biker gang that shows up at the end of the movie, and they lead to some very fun scenes as well. They have a sense of humor too, but just for the terrible people that they are, you wouldn't necessarily want to be around them during the apocalypse. They'd be more of a last resort. Now, for the record, the only version of the remake that I'm familiar with is the unrated director's cut, which I understand, on top of the fact that it has gorier moments featured in it, it also features more in-depth character moments, so what I'm about to talk about may only apply to the director's cut version, at least as far as I know. But yeah, in the remake, you follow a considerably larger cast of characters in this mall, and there are really no straight-up villains among them. There is some tension in the group, and you are introduced to these pretty douchey characters at the beginning, but eventually they start to learn that they need to work together in order to win this war against the dead. And there is one guy who eventually becomes the villain, but there's a scene pretty early on in the film which kind of adds more impact to this moment, where he's talking about how he's here for a reason, and then, when that reason is taken away from him, it just completely drives him out of his mind. And then you've got this one character played by Ty Burrell who is more consistently douchey than everyone else in the film. But really, he doesn't come off as a straight up villain, he's just some asshole. Of course, as can be expected with a larger cast, there are some characters who are kind of thrown to the wayside so that when they leave the film, you're like, oh no, that guy got killed. Wait, what was his name again? But at the same time, you do get plenty of emotionally powerful moments with the characters who do get more attention. There is, in fact, one character who doesn't spend that long at all in the movie, yet, when his time comes, it is still very emotional, and it even leaves a lasting impact on some of the rest of the characters. Now, when it comes to the death scenes in Dawn of the Dead, the original is easily a lot more graphic. Like when the zombies take a bite out of people, you can just see the chunks being torn out of them. And one scene that's just pure nightmare fuel is when this guy gets surrounded and just starts having all of his intestines pulled out. And it also has considerably more inventive deaths, like this one bit where a zombie is approaching this guy by a helicopter and gets scalped by the helicopter blades. The remake still has some pretty good death scenes as well. The special effects work is very well done, like when you see zombies getting their heads exploded, and it still manages to work in some pretty painful moments, like at the very beginning when this guy gets his jugular bitten out. And now, of course, to talk about the zombies. In the original, aside from the fact that they have blue skin, they are still pretty gruesome to look at when you see the ones which have gone through further decay. And of course, they are the classic slow-moving zombies, although there is one small inconsistency in the film where you see these two kid zombies that run after someone. I don't know, I always thought that was kind of odd. And overall, there are some pretty scary moments with the zombies, naturally, like this one scene where a woman is reunited with her husband just to have him take that big bite out of her shoulder, and of course it's not him anymore. And then you've got that scene where this guy is doing some work in a truck, and these zombies are just slowly closing in on him and not even making a sound. That right there is the stuff of nightmares, but overall, I think the zombies in George Romero's original film are more funny than they are scary. I just can't help but laugh at how clumsy they are, as well as the fact that there's just this silly music playing over the mall intercom when you just see them walking around. And I also love, like, the gun zombie in this movie. There's one point where he, like, wrenches a gun out of someone's hand and he's like, ooh, I like this. I don't know what it is, but I'm going to keep it. And then later on in the film, he finds another gun and he's like, I like this one even more. Like, that's just comedy. In the remake, the zombies have this skin tone that suggests a little less of a Smurf apocalypse. And they do make some interesting changes to them. Like, for one thing, this, zombie virus is more of a viral infection that gets spread through bites and scratches. Whenever somebody dies of a gunshot or something else in the movie and is not attacked by a zombie, they don't end up coming back. One thing that I do think is kind of odd is the fact that in Zack Snyder's remake, the zombies don't go after animals, only people. It feels like they only added that element to them just for the convenience of the plot. Other than that, there aren't really any huge differences. Oh yeah, and I almost forgot about the fact that they can also move a little faster in the remake. which is one of the things that kind of kills the movie for a lot of diehard fans of the original. And their argument is usually that fast zombies don't make sense. We're talking about dead bodies that come to life and eat people. How does any of this make sense to begin with? And really, the fact that the zombies can run in the remake means that there's much more of a threat to them. If they're just kind of slowly walking after you to the point where it's going to take them about 4 days to catch up, they're not that threatening. That's one of the things that made them so funny in the original. Like, you could even probably make it through a crowd of them with all of your skin intact, but I mean, if they can run after you and there's a huge crowd of them, survival isn't much of an option. In the end, I think this is probably the closest competition for me in terms of the comparisons that I've done this month, even in comparison to the ones I'm going to do in the future. And I understand that most people may be more easily decided on this issue. There are a lot of people who may comment on this saying, well, the original is so much better. And then probably a handful of people who will say, well, I like the remake more. But yeah, like, the original George Romero film is a phenomenal movie. It's got great special effects, most of which hold up to this day. It can be scary as hell, but at the same time funny as hell. I like the fact that there are more antagonists that the characters have to deal with, and it has more quotable lines going for it. Like, it gets up and kills. The people it kills get up and kill. And then, of course, the famous "when there is no room in hell" line, which they reused in the remake with the same actor. With the remake, you've got arguably more powerful emotional moments, and of course, it's a lot scarier. For me personally, it's one of the most terrifying movies I've ever seen. I saw the film for the very first time when I was 14 years old, and I seriously had nightmares about this movie for months. I mean, I hate the idea of being trapped by these flesh-eating corpses, and, just add on top of that the fact that, again, they can run after you, and that they don't even have the capacity to run out of breath since they don't need to breathe anymore. For my final decision, the remake still holds a special place for me for just how severely it was able to terrify me. And in regards to the characters, they're still funny as hell. And despite the fact that there's a much larger cast this time, they were still able to affect me more on an emotional level. So I'm going to have to say I'm part of that handful of people that I mentioned before. Personally, I prefer the remake of Dawn of the Dead. Anyway, that's all I've got to say for this comparison. Don't be too hard on me in the comments. I hope y'all have a good one.